Hey guys, it's Nathan here, and today we're answering the question, what is a safety management system? So a safety management system is essentially a bunch of documentation which helps manage health and safety within an organization. Sometimes it might be called a WHS or OHS management system. Those are essentially different names for the same thing. What you see in front of you here, that is our safety management system. This system complies with the international standard 45001. This is a typical sort of system, depending on the organization. They may have more documentation, may have a little bit less. Also, with our system, we actually provide a bunch of auxiliary or other documentation. So it comes with, it's about 150 documents total, all auxiliary documentation. So this isn't technically part of the system, but if you want it to be part of the system, you just drag it over into the main system folder. The idea being that we wanted to keep the system as small and as easy to implement as possible, while at the same time having a huge bunch of documentation that you can use at your discretion. So the first document we're going to talk about is the manual. Now what you're looking at here is actually the overview of the system. This is Appendix A of the manual. So we're actually in the manual right now. So the manual is kind of like the manual for your car or your fridge. You're probably not going to read it a lot, but it is very important, so don't lose it. This explains how all the parts of the system integrate or work together to meet the requirements of the standard. So the person who's going to be implementing or managing the system should be fairly familiar with this document. So read it, and then it also gets pulled out for audit. The next document that we're going to look at is the policy. So the policy is just a one-page document, kind of like a vision or a mission statement that outlines the company's commitment to health and safety. It needs to be signed or approved by the director or the owner of the company, and it also needs to be communicated to stakeholders, so whether that's putting it on the website or putting a copy on the office wall. Next, we have the management plans. We have two of them that come standard with the system. Health and safety management plan is this first one you see here. A lot of companies won't need that, but a lot will. So we do supply it as standard. Companies that need health and safety management plans, typically industrial clients or construction clients that have a project or a site, and that's what the health and safety management plan does, outlines the safety requirements for that site. The other management plan is the emergency response plan. All companies should have an emergency response plan. This goes through details and information on what emergencies are expected and how we're going to manage them. So just a bunch of flowcharts to train staff on what to do in an emergency. Next, we have the risk management procedure. Now, this is the only core system procedure. We do have a bunch of others that if you want to have in your system, you can, but this is the one core procedure that you will need as part of your system. Now, this procedure is based on the Health and Safety Code of Practice for Managing Risks, which has the 4 key steps: hazard identification, risk assessment, risk control, and monitoring and review. This procedure also has your risk matrix in it, which will be important because you need to use it in other documentation. Next, we have all of our registers. So registers are basically Excel spreadsheets that are used to track information. The first one we have is the master document register. So this tracks all the documents that are part of the system, helps you keep an eye on their review dates. It's a good idea to review these at least yearly. So that's what the master document register does. The legal register tracks all the relevant legal requirements for the company. So things like acts, regulations, codes. Corrective actions register, that's pretty self-explanatory. So any issues that are identified that relate to health and safety, so that we don't forget about them, we record them in the corrective actions register until they get closed out. So corrective actions can come from things like audits or inspections, or maybe to help close out an incident. Next is the statistics register. So a lot of systems will have an objectives register and a statistics register. We don't have the objectives register because the objectives go in the manual. And then what the statistics register does is it helps track our progress towards meeting our objectives. So let's say we have an objective that we want to distribute 1 safety alert every month. That's fine, that's a good objective. What we do in here is we track how many safety alerts we're distributing. So if we get to the end of the year and we're like, hey, we only did 4 safety alerts and we were hoping to do 12, that sort of shows us like, hey, we need to pick up our act and distribute more safety alerts. Next is the WHS Risk Register. So what the WHS Risk Register is basically a very high level summary of all the risks that we face in our organization and what we do to manage them. So for example, here, lifting and loading. Let's say our company does lifting operations. What are the hazards, drop load, suspended load, etc.? What are the controls? So having trained and competent personnel, having suitable lifting equipment, that sort of stuff. So that's what a risk register is. Training register is used to track licenses and qualifications for different staff. A lot of them have expiry dates or need refresher training periodically. So you put the dates in here to keep an eye on that sort of stuff. The next three here are plant and equipment registers. So they're to track sort of safety vital equipment. So things like electrical testing and tagging, lifting testing and tagging, fire extinguishers, that sort of stuff. Pretty self-explanatory, those three. Approved supplier register. So there's a requirement that if we have suppliers or subcontractors that need to be managed as part of the safety management system, the requirement is that we pre-qualify them. If you don't know what that means, that's fine. We're getting to it shortly. Once they're pre-qualified, they get added to the approved supplier register. So then we say, okay, these people can come and work on our site, or they're an approved supplier or contractor. Safety data sheet, pretty straightforward. All the safety data sheet info goes in there for all hazardous chemicals. Okay, so bear with me, guys. We're almost there. Last folder, tools and forms. So these are all the front-end documentation. First of all, we have position descriptions. These are pretty self-explanatory, just outline the duties for workers, and then they get signed off. There's three different parties that you will need as a minimum. One is the director, one is the safety management system manager, and the other is workers. Essentially, everyone else can be workers. Now, you may need company-specific ones like supervisors, laborers, operators, that sort of stuff. That's fine. We can create them or you can create them, but you will need these three as a minimum. Organizational chart, pretty self-explanatory, just a very simple org chart there. WHS induction, once again, pretty self-explanatory. That's just a simple WHS induction for new workers. Supplier pre-qualifications. So this is if you are using subcontractors or suppliers and they're on your site, you want to manage them. This goes through questions like, do they have insurances? Do they have tickets and licenses, etc. Once they complete that and it's reviewed, then they get added to that supplier, approved supplier register that we were just looking at. Another requirement of the standard is that we supervise or monitor our suppliers' health and safety performance. So that's what the supplier evaluation form is. Just a very simple little tick, 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 and give some answers there as to how well the supplier is performing health and safety wise. So safety alert, this is normally just a template, but we've pre-populated this one. So safety alerts are used to communicate incidents or near misses to workers. So this example here, a guy died, an electrician was electrocuted and fell to his death. So that can be used to highlight, you distribute this to workers and say like, hey guys, this happened on a site that could potentially happen to us. This is the hazards involved, and this is how we make sure it doesn't happen. Usually run that as part of like a toolbox and get them to sign off on a toolbox report or something similar. The next two here are the review meetings. So there's a requirement of the standard that workers are given the opportunity to provide input to the system. We call this worker consultation and participation. So the WHS review meeting is just basically a very quick overview of the entire system that workers need to be familiar with, things like the objectives and resources and statistics and procedures and that sort of stuff. And they're given the opportunity to provide their feedback. The other meeting is for management. So it's very similar in terms of content, but it needs to be for the top managers. So directors, business owners, those types of people need to be involved in the decision-making process, and they need to be aware of the system. It can't be delegated to a manager or someone else. It's a requirement of the standard that it needs to be top managers, so directors, PCBUs, those types of people. The next four here, all very simple. So emergency drill, pretty straightforward. We recommend running those about every 6 months. Inspection, once again, pretty straightforward. That's just a workplace safety inspection. Incident report and investigation, we've combined the report and the investigation into one form. And then internal audit. The internal audit is just a review of the standard of the system against the international standard 45001. Now, in addition to this, companies will need their own sort of industry or company-specific documentation. So, for example, if you're doing high-risk construction work, legally you have to have a safe work method statement. If you're doing confined space work, legally you have to have a permit. Now, our system does come with all of that documentation, but it's all over here in the other folder. So an auxiliary safety forms, there's a SWIMS template and a confined space permit. So if that documentation is relevant for you, all you have to do is give it a document number, drag it over into the main system folder, and start using it. It's as easy as that. So I hope that was informative and useful. And if you're interested in our integrated management system, we're going to be making a video on that shortly. So thanks for watching.